Are the Green Bay Packers really going to just run this all back? It seems like it. So now what? Plus, Lily Zhao joins us for our final edition of the 2022 season, although it, of course, is the year 2023 of Zhao You Doing with our pal Lily Zhao. It all starts right now.
You are Locked On Packers, your daily Green Bay Packers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Packers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Peter Bukowski, and I cover the Packers for The Leap, a newsletter I would love for you to subscribe to. Follow me on Twitter, Peter_Bukowski. Follow the podcast on Twitter at Locked On Packers. Like us on Facebook. Subscribe to the podcast, iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts. Wherever you find podcasts, you will find Locked On Packers, the #1 Packers podcast on the internet. And the show for fans who know what happened, they want to know why and how. Today's episode brought to you by our friends at PrizePicks. PrizePicks is daily fantasy made easy. And if you use the promo code LOCKEDON, you will get up to $100 on a deposit bonus when you use that promo code on that first deposit. Lily Zhao on the show today. Zhao, you doing? We thought we'd have at least one more of these because we thought the Packers would beat the Lions. They didn't. So Lily's season officially is over, but we'll have her back in the offseason, of course, and through the summer and the spring and all the good stuff that we get to talk about. There's still, I am, my cup runneth over with, well, for the moment, like bourbon, because this is not the way that anyone thought the season was going to go. But no, in all seriousness, there's just so much to talk about, from free agency to contracts to the draft, and trying to figure out the direction that this team can go. And you know, Matt LaFleur said he was really excited to dig into these problems and try and find fixes. Certainly the way that they thought these things were going to go is not the way that they went. So are they actually going to make changes? And that's the part of this that is tough right now, because Matt LaFleur said he doesn't expect any coaching staff changes. Now, who knows? If Ejiro Evero becomes available, maybe that changes. If Jim Leonard calls Matt LaFleur, maybe that changes. Who knows? Maybe if Cliff Kingsbury says, yeah, I like the $7-10 million or whatever I'm getting paid to not play, or not coach, but I don't know. If Aaron Rodgers is coming back, I'd love to coach Aaron Rodgers. You know, these things are possible. We'll see. But I think what they're telling us by essentially saying this is going to be status quo, coaching staff wise, is they believe in the process. They believe in their coaches and they believe in their players. And I think they're right to believe in the talent of their players. It's pretty clear that there's talent on this team. We just don't see them perform consistently. And that includes the best guys on the team. Guys like Jair Alexander, not always the most fundamentally sound. Play to play, down to down, drive to drive. Guys like Allen Lazard, drops in key spots. Someone like Aaron Jones with the fumble. I mean, it's not the end all be all, certainly, but Andy Herman, who grades every play and every player, I think he had 5 guys who had the same or higher grades in 2022 compared to 2021. And it was like guys like Jonathan Garvin, who had just been an atrocity last year. So any level of play where you could actually be on an NFL field reasonably would be an improvement. Like, we didn't see Big Bob Tunyon 1 year further removed, or by the end of the season, he didn't play great to start the season. He gets hurt by the end of the season. No, we didn't see that. We didn't see, someone like Russell Douglas maintain his level of play. We didn't see Darnell Savage get better. In fact, we saw him get worse. We didn't see Randall Cobb with a full season make significant improvements. In fact, you could play this season 100 times and do it 50 with Randall Cobb and 50 without Randall Cobb, and you probably get the same outcomes in the aggregate in both simulations because he was not an impact player this season. And that sucks because he's a beloved Packer. He's one of Aaron Rodgers' closest friends. He is a terrific guy. But this team did not get what it needed from a lot of its best players. So that leaves you wondering. Decisions in free agency. Opportunities with the trade market. Brandon Cooks wants to be traded. DeAndre Hopkins reports yesterday the Cardinals are going to look to trade him. I did float the day before a DeAndre Hopkins trade. I did float several hours before that report came out. A Russell Douglas, or no, it was an Eric Stokes for DeAndre Hopkins trade. I had initially thought Russell Douglas, but that seemed a little too easy. Like, yeah, of course you do that, older, all those things. What can I say? Not an accident. Not an accident that those things happened in the order that they did. But so I think for when we're trying to figure out, okay, where will this team go? Where does it have to go? Clearly, they feel like the path is not far from the one that they've been walking. And so then that leads us to the quarterback. What is Aaron Rodgers going to do? Well, they have some financial levers that they have to pull really no matter what. Because if Aaron Rodgers is on the roster, it's going to cost him $31 million on the cap. If he's not on the roster, it's going to cost them $40 million on the cap. So that's not that big a difference. Now, that $9 million when they're already over the cap, and we'll see what the cap is, but when they're already over the cap, got to figure that part of it out. But they can change, I mean, 35, 40 million pretty easily that they can trim from this cap without cutting anybody, without releasing anybody. Now, that means, okay, do you have money to bring back an Alan Lazard and Adrian Amos? Adrian Amos can be put right into the dead money hold if he's willing to play for in that $5 million, $6 million range. You know, you get a tender on Yosh Nijman. They can make this all work. We have to know what the situation is with the quarterback and how much of the Packers are looking for status quo is about Matt LaFleur just believing in his guys and believing in his own process, and how much of that is about saying, okay, we're actually moving toward Aaron Rodgers and a return there. He had a conversation, Aaron Rodgers did, with Matt LaFleur after the game. Sounded like, you know, if you listen to some of the national media, they think he's done. They think he's retiring. And I have to say, I watched the press conference and experienced it live going, some of this is standing out to me. Some of this is something you would only say if you are strongly considering not being with this organization anymore, whether that is in retirement or on another team. You know, the idea that this team might need another voice, that it might be in the best interest for the Packers, that the Packers might choose to move on from him, that he would understand if they wanted to do that. And I'm still trying to figure out, like, is this the couple where they both know that they need to break up and neither side wants to do it? And they're basically like, is that Aaron Rodgers saying, please, you be the one. I don't want to be the one to end my time in Green Bay. You have to be the one. But we both know this isn't working. I don't know if that's the case, but it might be. We have to get that clarity before almost anything else can happen. And so that's why these decisions, Aaron Rodgers is in Green Bay over the next couple of days, was not on Pat McAfee yesterday, but will be next week. I don't know that we can read too much into that, but remember last year, he did a McAfee or two right after the season and then was gone for a while. And I think a lot of us assumed he was going to announce live that he was going to be back on, on the grind with the boys, but he didn't do that. So we'll see if that matters. I wonder if he's going to retire, if that decision will come sooner or than later. Like, if you're ready, you're ready. I can't imagine if if the answer is retirement or somewhere else, that you need a month to figure that out. You're just ready. Like, you go, okay, I've had some distance from the loss. The season is over. But, you know, I think that it is a fool's errand to try and psychoanalyze Aaron Rodgers in a lot of ways. So I'm not going to do that. But all that stuff needs to get ironed out before they can chart a course here moving forward. But there is a path to just run this all back, have some cap space to add a guy here, add a guy there, maybe make a trade. Hope that in year two, this already very good draft class can be even better and improve in year two. You hit on a pick or two in this upcoming draft, and then you're off and running. At the 15th pick, you get an edge rusher. In the second round, maybe you get a tight end. Round 3, a safety, and you build it around the edges. Like, I don't think there's high level needs here. Aaron Rodgers said there are a couple players away. Is that 2? Is that 3? Those players might be on the team. Devontae Wyatt, year 2. Quay Walker, year 2. Eric Stokes, back off injury, year 3. Maybe some of those guys are already on the roster. TJ Slayton. But we haven't seen it. So until we do, Packers have to figure it out. Go to TurboTax and don't do your taxes. Meet with an expert who will do them for you. TurboTax experts can relieve you the stress of taxes and file for you so you can do not taxes. Show your eyes things that are not taxes. Unpack a moving box of not taxes. Taste not taxes. Tasty. Sing not taxes a lullaby. Hope not taxes sleeps through the night. Grab a saddle and ride not taxes into the sunset. With TurboTax, an expert will do your taxes from start to finish, ensuring your taxes are done right, guaranteed, so you can relax. Feels good to be done with your taxes, doesn't it? Go to TurboTax and don't do your taxes. Visit TurboTax.com and learn more. Intuit TurboTax, full service products only. Video meetings while expert does your taxes required. See guarantee details at turbotax.com/guarantees. And today's episode is brought to you by Ultimate Football GM. Ever dreamed of becoming an NFL GM and managing your football franchise? Well, your dream can come true, and this game is definitely for you. This is for the kind of person that likes my show specifically because it is for the football nerd. It is for someone who wants to dig into the weeds, the details, hiring the right coaches, trading players, making draft picks, but also navigating through things like hiring the right scouts and setting ticket prices. It's all available to you there, and it all can make your team better. It all affects all the different parts of your team. Locked On Packers listeners can get a 100% free boost to their franchise when they use the promo code Locked On in the game store. That's Locked On. So make sure to check it out today. To download the game, just visit ultimate-gm.com to look it up, or look it up on the App Store. That's ultimate-gm.com. And thanks for making Locked On Packers your first listen every day. Subscribe to Locked On NFL, and your daily conversations on the biggest NFL stories will be waiting for you. Plus in-depth analysis on the biggest games with NFL key predictions every Friday. And then on Monday, local insiders cover the weekend with game-to-game episodes. Locked On NFL, available on YouTube and wherever you get podcasts. We thought we'd have at least one more of these after this week, but that's not how it worked out. The Packers had other ideas. Certainly, they lost to the Detroit Lions, so their season is over. That means our time with Lily Zhao is coming to an end from Fox 6 in Milwaukee. Our pal and yours, Lily, is here. How you doing?
Oh, Peter, I wish we had another week to do this as well. Disappointing end.
Maybe a couple more. Who knows?
A couple more. Yeah, I think we're all kind of hoping in that run that we would have that opportunity. But it's been a great season with you and everybody listening. So thank you for everyone for tuning in. And is that how you're doing, Peter?
I'm good. Yes, win, lose, or draw. It is always great to have you on the show. And I think our listeners feel the same. So I'm a little bit at a loss at times thinking about this season and this game, and I've been trying to wrap my brain around it here over the last couple of days since this happened. I kind of don't want to worry about the Lions game because that's just one game. I do think, though, it is emblematic of some of the issues the Packers had this season. If you had to put one thing on it, What do you think is the biggest reason this team did not look like it did last year?
Oh, that is a great question. I think that's one that the players and coaches are also searching for, right? That answer of why was this team just not as good as, it looked on paper? Why was it not as good as I think they thought they were going to be? Because, I think when Aaron Rodgers said last March he was coming back, I think a lot of people thought, okay, potential Super Bowl run this year, even without Davante Adams, they'll find a way. I think, like Rodgers alluded to, when you're talking on offense, it was they were never really able to supplement the loss of Davante Adams. And it certainly helps does not help when you have, your two rookies that you were really dependent on coming in and out all season with injuries. The offensive line was kind of shuffling a bunch as well. But I just think overall as a team, offensively and defensively, the special team certainly took a big jump this year with Keyshawn Nixon. I just think everybody certainly underperformed from what we thought they were capable of, and that was big, especially for the defense, but they were able to pick it up this last month. But I just think it was underperforming from a lot of different positions. Aaron Rodgers, his year wasn't the best either. So just a culmination of all of that, just for a team collective, is kind of what I think was a big stumbling block for them this year.
Yeah, Stephen Ruiz at The Ringer, he phrased it that this offense was mostly the same offense, only they lost two superstars. They lost Davante Adams and the superstar version of Aaron Rodgers. And that seems right. I mean, if Aaron Rodgers is Aaron Rodgers, the way that we saw him the last 2 years, this team wins 10, 11 games probably, right? Like they're that difference in quarterback play because quarterbacks matter so much. Like that's a huge factor here. And that's not even to blame Aaron Rodgers necessarily, but like that is the difference, because I do think there were extenuating circumstances. Let me pull this piece out of the Lions game, Lily, because the offensive line was healthy and still struggled against the Lions front that, Aiden Hutchinson is a rookie, is a nice player. They have some nice players, but they got manhandled a little bit in this game. And this is a trend for this team that in the games in the Matt LaFleur era where they need their best players to play their best, they haven't gotten their best. And I just don't know how you change that. So let me ask you the impossible question and ask you, how do you change that? And by the way, if you have an answer, please call Matt LaFleur and tell him.
I wish I had an answer, but I don't know if it's a mental thing. I don't know if it's like the equivalent of the yips where you're like, this is kind of your biggest game of the year, right? Because if you don't make it, your season's over. It's like you have to win. I don't know what it is, but it's about these pressure-filled games and these big moments for this team the last couple of years. And unfortunately, they've all been at home where they've just underperformed or they just don't look like they're ready to play. And the other team comes into Lambeau and absolutely looks like they are ready to go and ready to beat the Packers and send them packing. And that's what happened. It's when you looked at the Week 9 game against the Lions, right? I mean, they certainly had their issues against this defense as well. The red zone offense was terrible, and they couldn't put up any points. Same script in Week 18. You thought there would be kind of a difference with how this offense had been doing the last month and how the defense had been doing this last month. And it just was, I don't know what it is about these pressure-filled games, but I think it's maybe if there was another game after this where, they had something else to play for after, maybe this is one where they would have been, still playing at their peak performance, but I don't know. It's just these games, for some reason, this team just can't get up for. I think that's disappointing.
I was talking about this with some media friends the other day, and this idea, you go back and look at, like that 2010 team, Charles Woodson. Yes, he was a great player on that team, but he was also a stabilizing force in the locker room from a leadership standpoint. You look at 2014, Julius Peppers didn't say a lot, but when he did, everyone listened. And that team always seemed ready to go. That team would jump on you in the first quarter. That team jumped on the Seahawks in the NFC Championship game in the first quarter. And we just haven't seen that over the last few years. They brought in some free agents, but like Zadarius Smith has not been through it in the playoffs. He can't really be that guy. So I'm just wondering, like, even if it's someone who isn't a great player anymore, if that kind of veteran presence, I think particularly on defense, if that is the kind of thing that could help just tighten things up a little bit. What do you think of that?
I think that would certainly help. I mean, you have to have this rallying cry, right? And then when you're looking at that person who's giving that speech, or, they're saying, hey, guys, we got to rally together. It's someone they respect. It's someone who's been in the league a long time. Somebody, like you mentioned, has been through it. They've gone through, these struggles, or they've gone through the postseason and they've gotten through it. I think they do certainly need somebody in that room to to rally the troops, because it just felt like, there's certain games, like the Vikings game, it was just everything was going right. And I think for me, when I saw Mason Crosby's field goal doink the wrong direction, everything's going wrong for this team, because what they've been doing the last month did not work, and they didn't really go to it in week 18. And maybe had you had somebody in the locker room being like, hey guys, what's going on? Let's flip a switch here. Maybe that would have helped them in the second half, because the game was winnable. It was right there and they just couldn't do it.
Yeah, and maybe helps just with the poise part of it, right? To have Quay Walker ejected, to have Russell Douglas get the 15-yard penalty. I hate to do this. I really hate to do this. It kind of seems like in retrospect, JJ Watt would have been worth whatever the Packers had to pay him, whatever salary cap machinations they would have had to do. Like, I know he's still been a really good player over the last couple of years. It just seems like that kind of, and at the position that he plays, I don't even want you to answer, because it's going to make Packer fans upset to even talk about. But we found out from Matt LaFleur early in the week that Joe Barry, he anticipates being back. I think that's about as close as a confirmation in terms of a guarantee that we're going to get. What was your reaction when you heard that, and why do you think Matt LaFleur ultimately came to that decision?
Regardless of what does happen, maybe he's let go later in the year. I just don't see Matt LaFleur as a guy, not throwing his guy under the bus. That's not the right terminology, but I know Matt LaFleur is always going to stick up for his guys. It's the guys he's hired. He loves his coaching staff for a reason. I think this last month was an indication of what this Joe Barry defense could do. The guys were executing. Things looked great. And then this last, week 18 game, it just kind of was a complete 180 of they did play well enough, and the offense certainly didn't hold their bearing there. But
20 points, you feel like you should win those games if you're an Aaron Rodgers team.
Right. But then it's at the end when you have, a 3rd and 3, a 4th and 1 to basically win this game, and the Lions, 2 easy plays there to get a first down.
Yeah.
It's what that was kind of a culmination to me of, it hasn't been working, but like Matt LaFleur said, winning kind of does mask up certain things. It does kind of camouflage some things where you're like, we'll let it go because we're winning. But to your point, I think the improvement has been there with Joe Barry to keep him around, but I think there needs to be a change there with his defense, because we're not going to be able to see winning defense when you're playing 10 yards off the line on 3rd and 10 to be winning football for this team moving forward.
I think some of the changes we saw, and I thought Derek Harrer for 247 Packer Report wrote a really good piece about some of the changes Joe Barry made, some of the coverage changes and the shell changes and the blitz changes. I thought were all important things, and maybe that is something that you can build on. I think we've seen that there are some clear weak points on this team. How they build this moving forward, I guess we'll see. I want to ask you about the Nathaniel Hackett part of this too, because Matt, I thought was pretty candid in saying that he had reached out to Nathaniel Hackett about potentially coming back, and that Hackett said, look, I need time. I want to be with my family. Like it sucks to be an NFL coach when it comes to your family, because you never get to see them until the offseason. And then to have him go through what he goes through just on a human level, not a fun thing. So I get needing some time, but do you think over the last couple of years, like they promoted everyone last year on the offensive side, they fired Mike Patton, hired Joe Barry, and kept basically every other coach the same. I posited this theory yesterday on the show that maybe they're getting a little too comfortable with familiarity, and then maybe some unfamiliarity would be good for this team. What do you think of that idea and of Nathaniel Hackett potentially coming back?
Two good questions. To the latter part about Nathaniel Hackett, I think it would be great to have him back, because you kind of never know what you have until it's gone, right? And, I know Devontae Adams.
Thanks, Tony Mitchell.
Yep. MVS leaving was a big part in terms of their players, but, Nathaniel Hackett leaving, Luke Getsy leaving. I mean, that offense went from automatic in the red zone to really, really porous this year in terms of not being
the worst goal to go offense in the league.
Not great at all. So you have to wonder, how big of an impact did those guys leaving have? A significant one this year when it's all said and done, right? I think when you have Nathaniel Hackett back in, he's a guy these players respect. The gold zone was a big thing. It was fun. I mean, these guys were playing loose last year with him in the locker room. I don't think it would hurt to bring him back, but maybe it's a decision they make in a couple of weeks when he has had time with his family to sit down, but don't think it'd be bad at all. And to your prior point, I forgot what the question was already, Peter.
Just the idea of having Matt LaFleur being a little bit too comfortable, or wanting to be a little bit too comfortable in the familiarity part of it, and not saying, hey, look, let's shake this up a little bit, even if that means someone that I'm not familiar with. They're doing some things that maybe I'm not as familiar with.
Yeah, I'm going to throw out a tangent here and I'll bring it back. It's who knows how it's going to play out at the University of Wisconsin, right? Chris McIntosh fires Paul Chryst, doesn't retain, did want, Jim Leonard, and brings in Luke Fickell, and you kind of see the trickle effect of having that new face in the building, what it does in terms of recruiting, and the potential of the scheme has changed as well offensively. Who knows how that's going to pan out, but maybe that's something the Packers need, right? Needs something from the outside to come in and say, hey, this thing hasn't been working the last year. What can we change? Who can we bring in that has an outside voice that can, be the change for this team? Because Rodgers said in his, presser, they're a couple guys away from being a Super Bowl contending team. But what kind of guys are they going to be able to bring in? With their money constraints, all these contracts they have to restructure. It's who are they feasibly going to be able to bring in that can be that catalyst to make this team a Super Bowl contender? And I think, to your point, maybe it's somebody on the staff or in that regard to switch things up.
I think that's, I compared to yesterday, not that I think he's a better coach or a better fit. I was just sort of like, I would be more excited if Matt LaFleur said, I called Cliff Kingsbury today to check in, just because that's something different, right? That's something that would really shake things up and say, yeah, we need not a big change, because Matt LaFleur is still calling plays, but I'm going to ask you about that right now. But just to say, look, what we've been doing isn't working. And LaFleur did say, look, I'm really excited to dig into these problems and figure out new ways to solve them. And I think that's what you want to have your coach say. Be excited about, like, that's all about enjoying the process, right? Even when it sucks and it's hard, you're like, I'm excited to tackle these problems. That's what you want in a coach. That's one reason why I would be nervous about him giving up play calling. We saw this with Mike McCarthy. It did not go well in 2015 when he gave up play calling, had to take it back. Do you think that's something that could help Matt LaFleur? And I say that with the understanding that we don't know who that potential play caller would be yet.
Right. He addressed it and said, right, if it's the betterment of the team, if it's going to help the team, I'll certainly, consider giving that up. When you're looking at how his relationship with Rodgers, Rodgers said after the game he didn't like the last 3 calls. It's a working relationship between the two of them. When we have a quarterback that can't audible at the line if he, sees the coverages are different. It's they haven't been on the same page all year in terms of those play calls, because Rodgers has been critical of a couple of those play calls that LaFleur has made. And, we kind of see some of his decisions on, that 4th down call deep in their own territory against the Lions that didn't work out well. It's maybe you do need that outside voice to say, hey, while I understand why you want to do this play schematically or just based off of everything that we've seen, it's not going to be the best one for you. So let's switch it up here. I don't think it would hurt. But again, to your point of Mike McCarthy relinquishing his control with his play calling, it did not go well. So I think the last thing you want to have happen is that to come true, and then you take it back. But I don't think it would hurt to have that outside voice, and maybe that's something LaFleur would consider. Yeah,
they need to put Chill Alaska on ice. I say that, no pun intended. That play was a disaster. Last thing here, Lily, as we head toward the postseason or the offseason, not the postseason. I'm used to, it's early January. I'm used to talking about the playoffs. As we head toward the offseason here, what is the single biggest position of need that this team needs to add? Aaron Rodgers said there are a couple players away. I can think of at least 2 places where I'm like, okay, if they add here and here, they'd be in pretty good shape. What is the one place where you're going, this is the spot?
Ooh, that's a great question. Are we talking offense?
I'm talking, let's take a holistic view of the team, but if you want me to pick a side of the ball, let's do one of each, offense and defense.
Okay. This might be a kind of bland answer on offense, but a surefire receiver. Not saying it's not Christian Watson or Romeo Doubs. Again, it's the rookie seasons. They're going to get much better. But if you think of, okay, if Rodgers had Devontae Adams or somebody of his caliber on that offense, I mean, it would have been a lot different in my opinion, or somebody with the ability to stretch the field alongside with Christian Watson. I think that would be certainly a piece. We talk about it all year. It's always like, get a receiver, maybe just a veteran presence who is a dynamic receiver would help on that team. And on the defensive side of the football.
How about a tight end? I think a lot of people are looking at tight end and saying, hey, if they had a legit, middle of the field threat, that would change this offense. I think that's an interesting thing, but rookie tight ends are almost always bad.
Right. And we saw the potential for Robert Tonyan, and it just, he had a great year, 2020?
2020, yeah.
Yep, and it just hasn't been there production-wise for him. He's still a solid guy, but he's not the caliber of a Travis Kelce or,
And physically doesn't look the same.
No.
He looks a step slower than he did before the injury.
And that's a bummer. It's need somebody of a Travis Kelce, George Kittle type tight end to bring into this team. But again, where are you going to find one, right? And
they don't grow on trees.
Correct. And if they did, that would be great. On defense,
They grow in Iowa, almost certainly, right?
Yes. Somewhere in the Midwest, I think. Just eating
corn, eating beef.
Yeah, just going for it. Defensively, that's tough though, because I could see them adding at all three levels there.
Yeah.
But I would say potentially just maybe somebody on the defensive line. I know these guys really stepped up this year, but it just felt like Jared Goff had all day to throw. They weren't really that disruptive. And yeah, the run game really was not that, they didn't really give up big chunks in the running game, but it's just their ability to get after the quarterback without Rashawn Gary has certainly lacked. And maybe somebody up front would help, but I could certainly see adding people at all three levels there.
It's going to be interesting to see. I think the only place that they're probably going to be set, because I don't think they're going to move on from Devondre Campbell, is at that off-ball linebacker spot. But defensive line, outside linebacker, safety, even corner, depending on how things shake out, I think you can never have too many corners. So we'll see what they decide to do there. Lily, it was a great season. Thank you so much. We had a great season. The Packers didn't have a great season, but I always have fun talking to you. I appreciate the time, and we will talk to you soon.
Thank you, Peter.
All right. Thanks to Lily for joining the show. Always great to talk to her. We're going to be back tomorrow. And then on Friday, it's not a summer Friday. I'm going to try and keep these conversations coming though on Friday. We have Joel Corey, former agent, NFL agent, knows the salary cap. He has a piece. If it's not up already, it will be up later today on Aaron Rodgers. I know because we talked about it, and we'll be doing an interview about that story, about that piece, because there's a lot of stuff about that contract that is unique to Rodgers, and it's very important when we look at this offseason to understand not only what's going on this offseason, but what could potentially happen next offseason as well. Today's episode brought to you by our friends at PrizePicks. PrizePicks is daily fantasy made easy. It really is. Because you don't have to worry about winning your pool. You don't have to worry about finishing in the top 1% or whatever. No, PrizePicks decides. They decide on something like, let's call it Trevor Lawrence passing yards and Justin Herbert passing yards. Put those two together with Mike Williams passing or receiving yards. You've got a lineup. That's it. And all you have to do is be right about whether you think those guys are going to produce more or less than the PrizePicks projection. That's it. You've got a lineup and you can win up to 10 times your money, and they do it in every sport you could possibly think of. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if you could make Quidditch lineups. I really wouldn't. Download the PrizePicks app or go to prizepicks.com to sign up and play daily fantasy sports. First-time users can get a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with the promo code LOCKEDON. Put in $100, they'll give you $100. It's that easy. Don't forget to use the promo code LOCKEDON at checkout to sign up and get that instant deposit match up to $100. And thanks for making Locked On Packers your first listen. For your second listen, check out Locked On NFL, bringing you the local insights you love to the national spotlight with daily conversations on the biggest NFL stories. Locked On NFL, available on YouTube or wherever you get podcasts. All right, back tomorrow. More Locked On Packers. We are still here in the offseason. Plenty to talk about. So continue to be here with us and be here with me. And I love being here with you. Follow me on Twitter, Peter_Bukowski. Follow the podcast on Twitter, Locked On Packers. Like us on Facebook. Subscribe to the podcast, iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts. Wherever you find podcasts, you will find Locked On Packers. And anytime you want to come hang out with us live during the season, Fridays, Sundays, we're there in the offseason for breaking news. We will be live on YouTube so you can stay Locked On Packers.